I have been sitting here for 3 hours now, maybe 4. I stopped counting around the time the last light on the street outside went dark, and now it is just me and the hum of the refrigerator and this glass of water I have not touched since I poured it. The water is warm now. I can see it from here, catching what little light comes through the window. And I think about how I used to tell Clara that warm water is bad for you, that you should always drink it cold, that cold water cleans the body in ways that warm water cannot. I do not know where I got that from. Probably my mother, probably some half-remembered thing from a kitchen in Georgia when I was 7 years old, sitting on a stool watching her move around the room, and she said something about water, and I held on to it the way children hold on to things without knowing why. Clara used to roll her eyes at me when I said that. She would pour herself a glass of warm water just to make a point, just to sit across from me and drink it slow, watching me over the rim, daring me to say something. And I would say something. I always said something. That was the problem with me and Clara. I always had something to say, and it was never the right thing. And by the time I figured out what the right thing was, she had already left the room. She has been gone for 3 months now. 3 months and 4 days, if I am being exact about it, and I am being exact about it because exact is all I have left. The date, the time, the sequence of things. I hold on to those numbers the way a man holds onto a rope in dark water, not because the numbers mean anything, just because they are there, just because they are solid and they do not change. She died on a Tuesday. That is what they told me. That is what the certificate says, the one I have in the drawer of my nightstand, because I cannot bring myself to file it somewhere proper. A Tuesday in October, when the leaves were already down and the air had that cold edge to it that makes the whole world feel like it is retreating somewhere. She was in a car. The other driver ran a red light on Morrison Avenue. That is what the officer told me on the phone. And I remember standing in my kitchen holding the phone with both hands, like I was afraid it would fall. Not because my hands were shaking, but because I did not know what to do with my hands. I did not know what to do with any part of myself in that moment. I just held the phone and listened to the officer's voice and tried to find something to hold on to in what he was saying. He kept calling her Miss Beaumont. Miss Beaumont this, Miss Beaumont that. She kept her mother's name after everything. That should not have stung me the way it did. But it did. Even in the worst moment of my life, I noticed that she had kept her mother's name. I went to identify her, or I tried to. They brought me to a room, a small room with no windows that smelled of something chemical and clean, and the man there, a young man with a tired face, he explained to me that the circumstances of the accident had been such that, he used those words, the circumstances had been such that, and what he meant was that she was not in a condition to be seen, that I should remember her as I had last seen her, that sometimes identification is made through other means, through effects and belongings and the records they keep, and that I should trust the process. I said, I want to see my daughter. And he said, sir, and he said he understood. And then he said again that the circumstances had been such that. I went home. I sat in this same chair, in this same room, and I sat here for 2 days without moving much. My neighbor Della brought food that I did not eat. My son Calvin called from Atlanta and said he was on his way, and he came. He stayed for 4 days, and he was good to me in those 4 days. He was patient and quiet, and he did not push me to talk, which is all I could have asked of anyone. Calvin is a good man. He learned that patience from his mother, not from me. The funeral was small. Clara had no children. She had a few friends I barely knew, women who came and held each other and cried in the way people cry when they are young and still believe that crying releases something. I stood at the front of that room and I looked at a casket and I thought about the fact that I had not spoken to my daughter in 14 months before she died. 14 months. That is the number I carry. That is the one that sits behind all the other numbers. Not the 3 months since she has been gone. Not the 14 days since I stopped sleeping properly. The 14 months when she was alive and I did not call her and she did not call me, and we both just let the silence build up like furniture in an empty house, piece by piece, until there was no room to move. I do not entirely know how it got to 14 months. That is the honest answer. I know the incident that started it. I know the words that were said. But 14 months is a long time to let something sit. And I have thought about it enough now to know that the incident was only the excuse, not the cause. The cause was older than that. The cause was something I had been building since Clara was small. Something in the way I was with her. Something I could not see clearly when it was happening, because I was too close to it, because it was me, and you cannot see yourself clearly when you are the one doing the thing. I am getting ahead of myself, or maybe I am not. Maybe this is exactly where I should start, with the 3 months and the 14 months, and the woman I saw on Delancey Street, because that is the thing. That is the thing I have not told anyone. Not Calvin, not Della next door, not the grief counselor the hospice people recommended that I call, whose card is still on the kitchen counter with the corners starting to curl up because I pick it up and put it down and pick it up and put it down and never dial the number. 3 weeks ago, I was walking on Delancey Street. It was afternoon, maybe 2 o'clock. I was walking to the pharmacy because my prescription was ready, and I had been putting off picking it up for 3 days, which is something I do now, put things off. Because when you are alone and old, and your reason for moving through the world has been reduced to the basic necessities of keeping a body going, the pharmacy stops feeling urgent. But I went. I put on my coat, the brown one, the one Clara used to say made me look like a detective from a 70s television show, and I walked to the pharmacy. I was coming back. I had the bag in my hand, the small white paper bag with the stapled top, and I was walking back down Delancey Street, and there were people everywhere, the way there always are, on that block around that time. People coming out of the laundromat, and people standing outside the beauty supply place, and people pushing strollers, and people just moving through the afternoon, the way people do. And I was not looking at any of them in particular. And then I was, because something made me look. I do not know how to explain what made me look. It was not a sound, and it was not a movement. It was something I cannot name, some shift in the air, or some pull in my chest, the way you sometimes feel before a storm, even when the sky is clear. And I looked across the street, through the people and the cars, and the ordinary chaos of a Tuesday afternoon. And I saw a woman. She was standing at the bus stop. She was wearing a green coat, dark green, like the color of deep water. And she had her head turned slightly away from me, looking down the street in the direction the bus would come from, and she had her hair up in a way that Clara used to wear it sometimes. A loose way, not careful, the way you put your hair up when you're not thinking about it. My body stopped before my mind did. My feet stopped moving, and I was just standing there in the middle of the sidewalk with the paper bag in my hand and people moving around me. And I was looking at that woman in the green coat at the bus stop, and something in me, something deep and animal and older than my thoughts, said, "That is Clara." I stood there. I do not know how long. Long enough that a man behind me said something irritated and moved around me and looked back at me the way people look at someone who has stopped making sense in a public place. And I did not care. I could not care. I was looking at the woman at the bus stop, and I was feeling something I do not have a word for, something that was not hope exactly, because hope is a light thing, and this was not light. This was heavy and violent, and it moved through me like a current. She turned her head, just slightly, just enough, and I saw her face. I saw her face, and I cannot tell you, I cannot fully tell you what happened in my body in that moment. Something collapsed and something surged at the same time, like two waves hitting each other, and I made a sound. I think I made a sound, something that came up through my throat without my permission, because the woman at the bus stop, the woman in the dark green coat, had the face of my daughter. She had Clara's face, not like Clara's face, not similar to Clara's face. Clara's face, the exact slope of her cheekbone, the way her lips are a little uneven, fuller on one side than the other, the small scar above her left eyebrow from when she fell off a bicycle at 8 years old, and I was the one who held her arm and walked her to the emergency room because her mother was at work, and I was the only one home. That scar, I could see it from across the street, or I believed I could see it. I believed it with everything I had. She saw me. She looked across the street, and she saw me. And I will spend the rest of whatever time I have left trying to describe what happened in her face in that moment. It was not surprise, not exactly. It was something more complicated than surprise. It was recognition, and something else, something that came right behind the recognition and changed it, the way you change your expression when you realize you have been caught doing something you cannot explain. She looked at me for 2, maybe 3 seconds, and then she turned away. She turned away, and the bus came, one of those long buses that kneel down at the curb, and the doors opened, and the people at the bus stop started moving toward the doors, and she moved with them, and she got on the bus, and the doors closed, and the bus moved down the street, and I was standing on the sidewalk on Delancey Street with my paper bag of prescription medication, watching a bus carry my dead daughter away from me. I did not run. I do not know why I did not run. My legs were there. The bus was slow at first. It had to pull back into traffic. There were maybe 10 seconds when I could have run to it, could have banged on the doors, could have made enough noise that the driver would have stopped, and I did not. I just stood there and watched the bus go, and I have asked myself every day since then why I did not run, and I do not have a clean answer. Part of it was shock. Part of it was something else. Part of it was that some old part of me, some part that had been trained across decades of disappointment and pride and distance, that part knew that if I ran and got on that bus and she turned away from me again, I would not survive it. So I stood there, and the bus was gone, and I walked home with my prescription, and I sat in this chair, and I have been sitting in it, in the way I am always sitting in it now, going over and over What I saw, what I think I saw, what I know I saw, turning it in my mind like an object I cannot quite identify. She was alive. That is the conclusion I keep arriving at. Not a look-alike, not a trick of grief, not an old man's mind going soft in the afternoon light. My daughter was alive. She was standing at a bus stop on Delancey Street, wearing a dark green coat 3 months after I stood in a funeral home and looked at her casket. And she saw me. And she got on the bus anyway. That is the part that lives in me now. Not the relief, not the confusion, not even the rage. Though the rage comes too, the rage comes in the night like a tide. It is the image of her turning away, the 2 seconds of her face, and then the turn. Because that turn was not the turn of a woman who does not know me. That was the turn of a woman who knows me very well and made a decision in the space of a breath. And the decision was to get on the bus. I have to understand why. Not so I can be angry. Not so I can confront her, though I think about that too. I think about what I would say, and every version of it falls apart before it gets to the second sentence, because I do not know how to begin a conversation that starts with, "Why did you let me believe you were dead?" I have to understand why, because without understanding why, I cannot place myself properly in my own life. I cannot make sense of what kind of man I am, what kind of father, if I cannot understand what drove my daughter to disappear so completely that she had to be dead to do it. And that is what this is about. That is what I keep coming back to, over and over, in this chair, in the night, in the quiet of this apartment that has felt like a tomb for 3 months, and now feels like something else I do not have a word for. She did not want me to find her. She wanted me to believe she was gone. She arranged for me, her father, the man who held her arm when she was 8 years old and walked her to the emergency room to stand in a funeral home and weep over a casket. She arranged that. She put that in motion. She did that deliberately and carefully, and with enough planning that it fooled everyone. The police, the funeral home, Calvin who flew down from Atlanta, Della next door who baked a pie. She did all of that to get away from something. And the question that sits at the center of all of this, the question I am most afraid to look at directly, is whether that something was me. I need to go back. I need to go back to where Clara started, where I started, where we started together, because I cannot understand the green coat on Delancey Street without understanding the 37 years before it. I'm not going to make this neat. I'm not going to make it into something that has a shape. It does not have a shape. It is just what happened. It is just the material of a life spread out across decades, accumulating, building toward things you do not see coming until they have already arrived. Her mother's name was Adrienne. I met Adrienne in 1979, which feels like something that happened to a different person entirely, a young man who wore a certain kind of shirt and thought about himself in a certain kind of way and had no idea what was coming. I was 26. Adrienne was 24. She was working at a credit union on Broad Street, and I was doing deliveries for a wholesale supplier. And we met at a lunch counter, the kind that do not exist anymore, the kind with the spinning stools and the man behind the counter who knew everybody's name. I sat next to her because there was no other seat. That is the whole story of how we met. There was no other seat. She was not immediately warm to me. Adrienne was never immediately warm to anyone. She had a way of sizing up a room, of sizing up a person that felt like an interview. She asked questions, and she listened to the answers with her whole face, And if she found something wanting in what you said, she did not tell you, she just stored it. I found out later that she stored things for a long time, and then sometimes, months or years later, she would take one of those stored things out and use it. Not to be cruel. That was never Adrian's intention. She just carried information the way some people carry tools, ready for when they might be useful. I loved her immediately. That is the truth of it. Not the way they write about in books. Not dramatically, but immediately. The way you recognize something. I sat next to her and watched her drink her coffee, and I thought, I am going to marry this woman. Not as a decision, as an observation, like noticing that it was going to rain. We were married in 1981. Clara was born in 1984. And I want to talk about when Clara was born, because I do not talk about it. I have almost never talked about it. And I think it is important. I think it is one of those things that accumulated. One of those stones that gets added to the wall, so quiet you almost do not notice, but the wall is higher for it. When Clara was born, I was not in the room. I know how that sounds. Let me explain what I mean. I was in the hospital. I was there. I had driven Adrian to the hospital at 4 a.m, and I had sat in the waiting area because that is what you did in 1984. They did not bring the fathers back, or they did sometimes. But Adrian's labor went complicated in a way nobody had anticipated, and things moved fast, and there were people moving through doors, and a nurse came out and told me something about there being a complication, and she would come back with more information. And I sat in that waiting area for 3 hours, not knowing. 3 hours. Not knowing if my wife was alive, not knowing if the baby was alive. Sitting in a plastic chair in a hospital waiting room in the middle of the night, not knowing anything. And I discovered something about myself in those 3 hours that I have never fully resolved. I discovered that when I am afraid, when I am genuinely and completely afraid, I go somewhere inside myself that is very far away from everything. I do not cry. I do not pace. I do not call anyone. I just sit and wait and go very quiet in a way that probably looks from the outside like I do not care as much as I do. Adrian was fine. Clara was fine. Everyone was fine. But by the time the nurse brought me back to the room, by the time I was standing there looking at my wife in a hospital bed holding this new small person, 3 hours had passed, and Adrian had gone through something enormous without me, and I had gone through something enormous without her. And there was a gap between us when I walked into that room that I did not know how to close. I walked in, and I stood at the foot of the bed, and I looked at Clara, this tiny red-faced creature with her eyes still swollen shut, and I said something inadequate. I know it was inadequate because I cannot remember what it was. If it had been the right thing, I would remember it. Adrian said, "She has your ears." And I laughed. And we were fine. We were fine on the surface. But something had been established in those 3 hours, some pattern or understanding, and it was this, that when things become dangerous, when things become uncertain, I disappear into myself, and the people who need me are left sitting with that. Clara grew up knowing that about me, though she would not have had a name for it when she was small. Children feel things before they can name them. They register absences. They understand, in their bodies, if not their minds, when a parent is present in the room, but not present in the way that counts. I was there. I was always physically there. I want to be clear about that because I have seen men who were not there, men who disappeared entirely, men who chose something else entirely over their families. And I was not that. I went to work. I came home. I sat at the dinner table. I attended the school things. I drove her to places. I was a present father in all the ways that can be measured and counted. But there is a kind of presence that cannot be measured and counted, and I was not always present in that way. I did not know how to be. That is the truth that I have arrived at after all this time. After all this sitting in this chair in the quiet of this apartment, I did not know how to be present in the way that Clara needed, which was a way that required me to say things, to name things, to acknowledge things out loud, to sit with her in her feelings, without immediately trying to resolve them, or minimize them, or move them along. I did not know how to do that. My father had not done that with me. His father certainly had not done that with anyone. There was a whole line of men behind me who handled their interior lives by not handling them, by leaving them on a shelf somewhere and walking past them every day without stopping, and I inherited that so completely that for a long time I did not even know there was another way. Clara knew. Clara knew there was another way, because she was Clara, because she read everything she could get her hands on from the time she was 11 years old, because she had friends whose fathers were different, who talked differently, who sat differently in their feelings, because she was smarter than me in certain ways, or maybe not smarter, but more honest, more willing to look at a thing and say what it actually was. When she was about 12, maybe 13, she asked me once why I never said I was proud of her. We were in the car, just the two of us. I was driving her home from some activity, some after-school thing, I do not remember what. And she asked me, out of nowhere, not in a fighting way, just in a clear and direct way that she had even then. She asked me why I never told her I was proud of her. And I said, of course, I'm proud of you. And she said, you've never said it. And I said, well, you know how I feel. And she looked out the window. She said, no, I don't. We did not talk for the rest of the drive. And I told myself later that she was being a teenager, that teenagers push you, that she was going through a phase, and I never sat down and said to her, you are right. I should say it. I am proud of you. Here is what I am proud of, and here is why. I never said it. Not because I was not proud. I was proud of her in a way that sometimes startled me, that came up on me at odd moments, sitting in the audience at her school performances, or watching her argue with someone at the dinner table, fierce and clear and absolutely sure of herself, and I would feel something enormous moving through me that I could not express and did not try to express, because the trying felt dangerous in some way I cannot fully explain. Like if I opened that, if I named it, something would shift that I was not ready to have shift. I do not know what I was afraid of. I have thought about this a great deal. Maybe I was afraid that if I gave her too much of myself, she would leave anyway. And then what? Maybe I was afraid of being seen that clearly by another person, even my own child. Maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe I just did not have the language for it, did not have access to the words, because no one had spoken them to me first. When Clara was 17, she went through something difficult. I am not going to say exactly what, because some of it is hers, not mine, to open up on a night like this, alone in this room. But she went through something difficult, a kind of darkness that settles on some young people, and she needed things from me in that period that I did not give her. Adrian knew. Adrian was there, in the ways that mattered. But I kept my distance in those months, not because I did not care, but because I did not know how to enter the room. I did not know how to sit with someone in darkness without trying to switch on a light, and Clara did not always want the light switched on. She sometimes just needed someone to sit in the dark with her, and I did not know how to do that. She got through it. Young people are more resilient than the darkness makes them feel, but she did not forget. That is the thing about children, the thing that takes you by surprise. They remember everything, not as a weapon, not necessarily, not at first. They just remember. They carry it the way they carry everything, folded up somewhere inside them, and it accumulates alongside all the other things. And sometimes you don't know what they've been carrying until the day they set it down in front of you and say, "Here, I've been carrying this." Adrian and I separated when Clara was 22. It was a long separation. We had been moving toward it for years, and both of us knew it, and neither of us said it, which is another pattern I seem to repeat. The not saying. The letting things accumulate in silence until they reach a point where there is no other option but to acknowledge them. Adrian left in March of 2006. She went to live with her sister in Charlotte, and she was right to go. And I told her that, which surprised her, I think. I said, "You're right to go." I didn't say I was sorry. I don't know why I did not say I was sorry. I was sorry. I am still sorry. But I stood at the door of our apartment, and I watched her go, and I said, "You're right to go," and she nodded and she left. And that was the end of 25 years. Clara was furious. Not at me, immediately. At first she was in shock, the way children are even when they are grown, even when they saw it coming. Then she was sad. And then she was angry at me. She did not say she was angry at me. Not directly. Not at first. But I could feel it in how she spoke to me on the phone, in how she answered my questions with just enough information to be polite and nothing more, in how she stopped coming to me when things happened in her life, good things or bad things, and started going directly to her mother. I accepted this. I accepted it because I thought it was temporary. I thought she would come back around. I thought things moved in cycles, and this was a cycle, and if I was patient and I did not push, eventually it would shift back. That is how I have always handled difficult things, by waiting for them to pass, by trusting that if I stay still, the water will settle. It does not always settle. Some things need you to move. Some things need you to wade in and disturb the surface, to reach in and find what is at the bottom and bring it up into the light. And I have almost never been capable of that. We had a period after the separation, Clara and I, that was actually better than what came before. Maybe because we both had less to lose by then. Maybe because Adrian's departure had cleared something out of the air between us, some triangulation that had been operating quietly for years. Whatever the reason, for a few years, when Clara was in her late 20s, we had something approaching closeness. We talked on the phone regularly. She came to visit me here, in this apartment, the one I moved into after the separation. She sat in the kitchen and I made her the rice dish she liked, the one with the butter and the thyme. And she ate it and said it was good the way she said things, directly, matter-of-factly, not making a production of it. And I felt something I had not felt in a long time, which was that I was in the right place. That is a feeling I have had very few times in my life. being in the right place. I should have said more in those years. I should have taken that window, and I should have done the things I did not know how to do when she was 12, when she was 17, when she was 22. I should have sat across from her at that kitchen table and said, I know I have not always been what you needed. I know there were times when you needed me to be in a room with you, and I was somewhere else. I know that. And I am sorry. I should have said that. Instead, I made the rice with butter and thyme, and I told her the thing about cold water, and I changed the subject when things got close to something real. And she let me, because she was trying too, in her own way. And maybe she was also afraid of what would happen if we actually arrived at the real thing. We never arrived at the real thing. There was an incident in 2021. This is the incident I was referring to before, the one that started the 14 months of silence. I am going to tell it plainly, because I have dressed it up in my mind enough times, justified it enough times, arranged it into a shape that was easier to live with, and I am tired of that. Plain is all I have the energy for now. Clara had been seeing a man named Terence. Terence was not a good situation. I want to be careful here, because Terence was not a bad person exactly. I do not think he was a bad person, but he was not a good situation for Clara. He had a way with her that I recognized even from a distance, a way that I had seen in other men and in myself sometimes, if I am honest, a way of making a person feel small in such quiet and careful ways that the person does not immediately identify what is happening. Clara was sharper than that. Clara was one of the sharpest people I have ever known. But nobody is immune to the right kind of quiet diminishment from the right person. I saw it and I named it, which was, given my history, an unusual thing for me to do. I called her, and I said what I thought I was seeing. I said it in the way I say most things, which is without much softness around the edges. I said it directly. I said, the man you're with is not good for you, and I think you know that, and I think you're staying because of something I probably had a hand in, and I think you should think about that. That is almost a word-for-word account of what I said. I was proud of myself for saying it. In the moment, I genuinely believed I was doing something brave, something useful, something that a father is supposed to do. I was naming the thing. I was wading into the water. I was doing the thing I always wished I had done. Clara was quiet for a long time, and then she said, I don't remember asking you. And then she said something else that I have replayed so many times it has lost some of its texture, worn down to the shape of the thing without all the surface detail. She said that me suddenly having opinions about her life did not make up for all the years I had no opinions about her life. That caring enough to criticize was not the same as caring enough to be present. That she did not need me to walk in after all this time and diagnose her relationship when I had not been there to help her build any of the things that came before it. And then she said, I need you to leave me alone for a while. And I said, I don't remember exactly what I said. Something defensive. Something that was probably not entirely wrong, but was also not the point. Something that proved her point while I was making mine. She stopped answering my calls. I called twice a week for the first month, then once a week, then every 2 weeks. Each time it went to voicemail, and I left messages that were at first pointed and then confused, and then toward the end of that stretch, something that was closer to an apology without quite being one. I said things like, I know I was too blunt. I know I handled that poorly. But the full apology, the one that said, I understand why you're angry and you have every right to be, and I'm sorry for more than just that phone call. I'm sorry for the accumulation of all the years before it. That apology I never gave. 14 months. And then she was gone. Or so I thought. Or so she arranged for me to think. I keep circling back to what it must have taken to plan something like that, to coordinate whatever needed to be coordinated. I do not know the full shape of what she did, how she did it, what she arranged. Did she find someone willing to use her identity? Did she exploit some breakdown in the process? Did she know someone who knew someone? She was always resourceful in ways that surprised me. She got things done through channels I would not have thought to use. That was another thing I should have said more about. She was remarkable at finding a way through. I keep thinking about who knew. Someone knew. Someone in her life. One of those women at the funeral who cried in that young way. One of them must have known. She could not have done this alone. She had help. That means she trusted someone enough to bring them into something like this, something irreversible and enormous. And she did not bring me in. She looked at the people in her life and she made a calculation about who was safe to trust with the truth of her, with the real and living fact of her. And I was not in that group. That is the wound that does not close, not the deception, the calculation, the assessment of me as someone from whom the truth of her life needed to be hidden so completely that only death would serve. I have a good picture of her. It is on the dresser in my bedroom, next to the lamp. She is 29 in that picture. We are at a family gathering, someone's birthday, I think, and she is laughing at something, her head thrown back a little, and the light is catching her from the side in a way that makes her look like herself, but also like her mother, and also like something I cannot quite name, some essential clariness that I knew from the moment she opened her eyes in that hospital room. I go in there sometimes, in the middle of the night, and I look at the picture, and I think, you are somewhere. You are somewhere, right now, breathing, maybe sleeping, maybe sitting up at night the way I am, maybe looking at a picture of your own, maybe wondering if I am looking for you. I did not tell Calvin. That is another thing. I have carried this alone for 3 weeks, and I have not told Calvin. We talk on the phone on Sundays, me and Calvin, that is our arrangement, and I have talked to him twice since I saw her on Delancey Street, and I have not said a word. I tried, once. I opened my mouth and started to say, something happened. And then I thought about what comes next, what comes after I say those words, the questions he would ask, the process he would want to initiate, the logic and the phone, calls and the looking. And I thought about the possibility that I am wrong, that it was not her, that it was a woman who looked like her in the afternoon light, and I am an old man who cannot sleep, and maybe. But it was not maybe, it was her. I have sat here for 3 weeks, turning over the possibility that I was wrong, and I keep arriving at the same place. I know my daughter's face. I know the scar above her eyebrow. I know the way she stands, with her weight slightly on her left foot, a habit she had since childhood that I used to tease her about gently, that I wish I had never teased her about. I know the way she turns her head when she's seen something she did not expect, and she is deciding what to do about it. I know all of that. And what I saw across Delancey Street was all of that. She is alive. She is somewhere in this city. Or she was 3 weeks ago. and she is living under whatever arrangement she has made for herself, and she is alive. My daughter is alive, and I do not know whether to feel relief or grief or rage or gratitude or all of those things at once, because all of those things are present. They are all present at the same time, crowding each other in a space that is not large enough for all of them. What I mostly feel is something simpler. I miss her. I missed her when she was alive and not speaking to me. I missed her when she was supposedly dead. And I miss her now, knowing she is somewhere, knowing she made a choice, knowing that the choice involved me in some way I have not fully reckoned with yet. My father died in 1992. I think about him sometimes when I am sitting here in the night. He died at 71, which means he was born in 1921, which means he grew up in circumstances I can barely imagine, in Georgia, in a time that I only know from stories and from what history books will say if they are honest, and those circumstances shaped him into a man who was also very quiet about himself, very contained, very unlikely to say the thing that would open up a conversation rather than close it. He loved me. I knew he loved me. I never doubted it. But he showed it in the way men showed it then, through provision and through physical presence, and through occasionally clapping you on the shoulder in a way that said more than his words would have. And I understand now, from the distance of my own age, that this was not a choice he made freely, that this was what was handed to him, that he was doing the best he could with what he had been given to work with. I am doing the same accounting of myself now. I'm sitting here in this chair asking myself what was handed to me and what I chose, where the inheritance ended and the responsibility began, and I do not have clean answers. I think the honest answer is that by the time a man is as old as I am, the distinction matters less than you think it will. Whether I was made or whether I chose, the result is the same. Clara is somewhere in this city, in a dark green coat, living a life that doesn't include me, and she made that so deliberately, so completely, that she had to die to accomplish it. That is the result. I keep going back to the year she was born. I keep going back to that waiting room and those 3 hours and the plastic chair and the nothing I knew. Because I wonder sometimes if something was established there that I should have recognized. Not about Adrienne, about me, about how I am when things are serious and uncertain. I go away, I go somewhere inside myself, and I sit very still, and I wait, and the people who need me are left to manage without me. And they do manage because they have no choice, and then they learn to manage without me even when I am there, because that turns out to be safer, or at least more reliable. Did Clara learn that? Did she learn, at some point, before she had the words for it, that managing without me was safer than waiting for me to show up in the way she needed? I think she did. I think she learned it early and confirmed it throughout her childhood, and confirmed it again at 12 in the car, and at 17 in the dark, and at 22 when her parents separated, and at 37 on the phone when I said the thing about Terence without enough softness around it. I think she learned that I would not show up the right way, and so when she needed to disappear completely and totally, and without any risk of me finding her, she put me in the category of people who would not show up the right way if they knew the truth. And that is why she is dead. Or that is the story I tell myself. It is possible the story is more complicated. People do things for complicated reasons. She might have had reasons I cannot imagine from here, reasons that have nothing to do with me, or reasons that have to do with me, but not in the way I am imagining. Terence might be part of it. There might be something else entirely. She might have been in danger in a way I do not know about, might have needed to disappear in a way that had nothing to do with father and daughter and everything to do with something else in her life that I was not close enough to see. But she saw me on Delancey Street. She saw me and she knew me, and she got on the bus. And that part I cannot explain away. That part is about me and her, about us, about what we are to each other and what I failed to be. Adrian called me after Clara died. She called from Charlotte, and she was on the phone for a long time, and she cried, which Adrienne almost never does. Adrienne is a woman who cries very privately and very rarely, and she cried on the phone, and I held my phone, and I let her cry, because there was nothing to say. She told me she loved Clara. I said I did too. She told me she was coming up for the funeral, and I said I would have Calvin pick her up from the airport, and she said that was fine. At the funeral, she stood on the other side of the room from me, not deliberately, not as a statement, just the way things arrange themselves when people have been separated for 17 years and are trying to be civil in a grief they share but do not share together. She looked older, which I suppose I do too, though I do not always see it in myself. She looked like she had been through something. She looked like she was being very careful to stay upright. I thought about going over to her. I thought about it for most of the service. And at the end, when people were moving around the room and doing the things people do after the formal part, I walked over to her and we stood next to each other for a moment, and I said, "I'm sorry." She looked at me. She said, "For which part?" And I did not have an answer that covered the whole of it, so I said nothing, and she nodded, a small and private nod, and then someone came to speak to her, and I moved away. For which part? I have thought about those words many times. There was something in them that was less about her and more about a question she had been carrying for a long time, a question about whether I was capable of knowing the full size of what I was sorry for, whether I could take the whole accounting, not just the incident, not just the phone call that started the silence, not just the separation, but all of it, the 3 hours in the waiting room, the car, and the 12-year-old, and the "I know how I feel," the dark years when Clara was 17, and I did not know how to sit in the dark with her. All of it, the whole accumulation. Could I take that on and say I am sorry for all of that, genuinely, not as a way of making myself feel better, but as a recognition of what was real? For which part? I do not know if I can do that. That is the honest answer. I do not know if the part of me that does the accounting is large enough to hold all of it at once. I can hold pieces. I can hold the phone call. I can hold the silence. I can hold specific moments and look at them and say, there, that was wrong. I should have done differently. But the whole thing, the full shape of my failures as a father, that is harder to hold. It is harder to look at directly, the way it is hard to look directly at the sun. And maybe that is the problem. Maybe that is exactly the problem. Clara looked directly at things. That was one of her qualities, one of the things I admired about her and also found difficult, because when she looked directly at something and then described what she saw, I often could not argue with her, and I am a man who has generally been more comfortable arguing than agreeing. She could see a situation and name it without flinching, and she expected the same from the people around her, and I was not capable of that most of the time, or I was not willing, and those two things may amount to the same result. I wonder where she is sleeping. I wonder if she has another name now. People who disappear like this take other names. That is what I understand. She would have had to establish something, a new way of being in the world. Papers, identification, some version of a life that did not begin with the name Clara Beaumont. I wonder what name she chose. I wonder if it means something. If she thought about it carefully, the way she thought about everything carefully, or if she chose it quickly and practically, whatever worked, whatever got her through. I wonder if she is cold. October is cold now, and November is colder, and if she is somewhere without enough, if she is managing the way people manage when they have had to let go of everything and start from nothing. 1. I do not know what I would do with that. I do not know what I would do if I found out she was struggling. I would want to help. And that is the irony of all of this. That is the bitter, circular human irony of all of this. I am the man who was not present enough, not warm enough, not willing enough to wade into the difficult water when she needed me to. And now I am sitting here at midnight, wanting nothing more than to find her and say, let me help. Let me be useful to you. Let me be, even now, even with everything, the thing a father is supposed to be. But I did not know how to be that when it would have changed things, and it would not change things now in the same way. That is what I have to sit with. That even if I found her tomorrow, even if I knocked on whatever door she is behind, the things I did not do, the words I did not say, the years I spent maintaining a careful distance from my own daughter's interior life, those things do not go away because I am sorry now. They stay. They are part of what is true. I think about a specific day, a day when she was about 9 years old. We were in this apartment. It might have been a weekend, and she came into the living room where I was reading the newspaper. The actual newspaper. This was before everything was on a screen, and she had something in her hand, a drawing she had done. And she stood next to me and she said, "Look what I made." And I looked up from the newspaper and I glanced at the drawing, a drawing of a house and some trees and figures that were probably us. And I said, "That's nice, sweetheart." And I went back to the newspaper. She stood there for another moment. I felt her standing there. I registered it. And then she went away. That is all it was. A small and ordinary moment of a father not fully present with his child. It happens 1,000 times in every family. It is not an indictment. It is not a crime. But those 1,000 small moments, added together, teach a child something. They teach her what she can expect. They establish a baseline. And the baseline Clara learned about me was that I was there, but not fully there. That I could give her a portion of my attention, but not all of it. That my full presence was reserved for something else, some interior thing that did not have room for the unscheduled needs of a 9-year-old with a drawing. I wish I had put down the newspaper. That is a ridiculous thing to wish. A newspaper. 40 years ago, a drawing. But it is the thing I come back to, because it stands for all the other things. It is small enough to hold, which makes it easier to look at than the larger failures. I can say, I wish I had put down the newspaper, and mean by it something much larger than any newspaper. I should have put it all down. I should have put everything down and looked at my daughter, Not just that day, the whole duration. I should have been looking at her more steadily, more completely, more present than I was capable of being. She deserved that. She was a child. She did not choose me any more than I chose to be the man I was. She got me, this particular man, this particular set of limitations and inheritances and blindnesses, and she tried to work with it for 37 years, and at some point she ran out of ways to work with it, and she chose a drastic solution. I do not say that without understanding how drastic it is. It is the most extreme thing a person can do, short of the actual thing. To die to everyone you know, to close every door, to burn every bridge so completely that no one will come looking, because there is no one to look for. I have thought about the planning of it, about the months of holding that decision, the decision being made, and then maybe reconsidered, and then made again. I think of her sitting somewhere, maybe in the apartment she had in Riverside, where I have only been twice, sitting and thinking about what to do and arriving at this, at the specific shape of this solution. Was I in her thoughts in those months? Was there a moment when she thought, if I do this, my father will think I am dead? Was that a consideration? Something she had to decide about, whether she could live with, whether it was acceptable? Or was it simpler than that? Was I just not a consideration? Was the calculation made without much weighing of what it would cost me? Because by that point, the cost to me had stopped being a factor she took into account. Both possibilities hurt. If she thought about me and went ahead, that is one kind of wound. If she did not think about me much, that is another. Neither is easy. But they are different. They say different things about where I stand in her life, in the life she was rearranging. Maybe the truth is that she thought about me and she made a decision about me based on what she knew, based on what 37 years had shown her. And what 37 years had shown her, in all probability, was that I would not pursue her, that even if she left me an opening, I would not take it, that I would sit with the loss the way I sat with everything else that was uncomfortable, quietly in a chair, waiting for the feeling to settle. And I did exactly that. For 3 months I sat with the loss and waited for it to settle. And then I saw her on Delancey Street, and even then, I did not run. I stood on the sidewalk and I let the bus take her. That is who I am. I do not say it with self-hatred. I have moved past self-hatred into something more like a weary clarity. This is who I am. I am a man who does not run when he should run. I am a man who sits when he should move. I am a man who waited until his daughter was dead, or pretending to be dead, to understand clearly what she had needed from him all along. This is who I am. And the question now, the only question that has any practical meaning, is whether knowing it changes anything, whether clarity arrives in time to be useful, whether there is still a door somewhere, some door I have not found that I could knock on. I think there might be. I think she went back to the bus stop. Not that day, not on Delancey Street. But I think she has a life somewhere in this city that includes bus stops and grocery stores and pharmacies, all the ordinary infrastructure of being alive. And that means she is somewhere. And somewhere is findable, theoretically, in a way that nowhere is not. Nowhere was what she had given me before. Now she has given me somewhere, however unintentionally, however reluctantly, by standing at that bus stop in the afternoon. She did not expect me to be on Delancey Street. That is important. She did not choose to be seen by me. That was not part of whatever she has arranged. She was just living in her city, going about her life, and I happened to be on that sidewalk, and she happened to be at that bus stop, and something I cannot explain, some animal awareness of the person I loved most and failed most, made me look across the street. So she did not give me that. It was not a message or an opening or an invitation. It was an accident. And she responded to the accident the way she responds to things I do not anticipate, with a quick and clear decision. Get on the bus, end the exposure. Do not let this change anything. But it has changed something for me. I do not know what to do with that. Calvin would say, call the police. Calvin is a practical man, a good man, a man who trusts systems and processes and the right way of doing things. He would say, she's alive. That changes everything. There are things that can be done. There are legal things. There are ways of. And he might not be wrong. There might be things that can be done. But the thought of doing them, of involving systems and processes and police in whatever Clara has built, whatever fragile structure she has erected to house her new life, the thought of bringing that down on her, of violating whatever she has carefully made, it sits wrong in me. Because she wanted this. Whatever her reasons, she wanted this badly enough to die for it, to construct a death, to arrange a casket, to let her family grieve. She wanted it that badly. And if I bring a system down on her, if I unmake what she has made, I am doing exactly what I have always done. I am being present in the wrong way. I'm showing up in a form that does not serve her, that serves my need to find her, my need to know she is safe, my need to say the things I did not say, my need. That has been the shape of so much of my failure. My need for quiet over her need to be heard, my need for distance over her need for closeness, my need to avoid the difficult conversations over her need to have them, always my need winning, quietly, without announcement, simply by being the one that determined the shape of things. I do not want to do that again, even now, even in this, but I also cannot just sit here. I cannot sit here in this chair for however many years I have left and know that she is somewhere breathing and making coffee in the morning and watching the light change outside her window. And not what? That is the question. Not what. What is the thing I want to do that would be right, that would serve her and not just me? That would be the version of this that a different man, a better man, a man who had done the work earlier, might do. I think I want to find her. I think I want to find her and then not do what I would have done before. I think I want to find her and stand in front of her and say nothing defensive, nothing justified, nothing that explains or contextualizes or minimizes. I think I want to find her and say the thing I have been carrying for so long that it has become part of my weight, inseparable from the weight of just being alive and old and aware of what I failed to do. I want to say, I am sorry, not for the phone call, not for any specific instance, for the accumulation, for the newspaper, for the car and the 12-year-old, for the 3 hours in the waiting room that established something without my knowing it, for the 14 months, for all the moments I stood in the doorway of where she needed me and did not come in. That is what I want to say. And then I want to listen. For once, I want to be the one listening. Not listening while formulating my response, not listening while building my defense, not listening with half of my attention still on something interior. listening the way she needed me to listen her whole life, listening until she runs out of things to say and a little past that, until the silence after is a different kind of silence, not the silence of things unsaid, but the silence of things finally said. I do not know if she would let me. She might not. She has made a life that does not include me, and she has made it deliberately, and that deliberateness deserves respect. She might hear me knock on whatever door she is behind and decide not to open it. She might look through the peephole and see me and decide that she is done, that she was done a long time ago, that whatever I have to offer in the name of too late is not something she has any interest in receiving. She might be right. I do not get to decide for her whether my apology is useful. I do not get to decide whether she needs it or wants it, or whether receiving it would do anything other than disturb the peace she has made. That is not my decision. It never should have been. The thing I fail to understand for too long is that Clara's interior life was hers. It was not mine to manage or minimize or resolve. It was hers. And if I ever get another chance to stand across from her, that understanding needs to be the ground I am standing on, not my need. Her, my father's hands. I think about this sometimes, late at night, the specific quality of my father's hands. They were large hands, working hands, the kind of hands that showed you everything a man had done with his time. He had a scar across 2 knuckles of his right hand that he never explained, and I never asked, and now I will never know. There are so many things I never asked my father because I inherited his silences, learned them as fluently as I learned anything, and brought them into my own life and applied them everywhere, including to my daughter. She asked me once about my father. Clara asked me once what my father was like when she was maybe 16 or 17, and I said, he was a hard-working man. He provided for his family. He was a man of his time. Those exact words, a man of his time. And Clara looked at me the way she looked at me when she was processing something that she had more to say about and had decided not to say. And she said, okay. She accepted that. She took the inadequate answer and stored it away with all the other inadequate answers. She did not push. She learned early that pushing me did not yield what she was looking for, that what she would get if she pushed was more of the same carefully maintained surface. And so she stopped pushing, or she pushed only when she had enough energy to absorb what she would get in return. I should have given her more. I should have said, my father was a quiet man who loved his family without knowing how to show it. And I know I have the same problem, and I have watched myself pass it on to you, and I hate that I have, and if I could figure out how to be different, I would, but I do not have the tools for it. And that is not an excuse. It is just true. And I am sorry for all the ways you have needed something from me that I did not know how to give. That is what I should have said. At 16, at 22, at 37. At any point in the 37 years before the Tuesday in October when she was not in a car accident on Morrison Avenue, when she was somewhere else entirely, becoming someone else's daughter or no one's daughter, starting again from a place where no one would call her by a dead man's name. She has my ears. That is what Adrian said. I think about that. Even now, wherever she is, she has my ears. She is walking around in her new life with my ears and Adrian's cheekbones and the scar above her eyebrow from a bicycle and the way of standing with her weight on her left foot. She is carrying me in her body, whether she wants to or not. the way we all carry the people who made us, the way I am carrying my father's hands every time I look down at mine. She cannot wholly disappear from me, and I cannot wholly disappear from her. That is something. I hold on to that, not as a claim on her, not as a reason she should come back, but as a truth about the nature of the connection between people who are made from each other. It does not dissolve. It does not end at a bus stop on Delancey Street. It continues, whether she acknowledges it or not, whether I deserve it or not. I loved her. I love her. Present tense. That is not complicated. What is complicated is that love is not the same as being good at loving. I loved Clara from the moment I saw her face for the first time in that hospital room 40 years ago. This tiny person with my ears and Adrian's cheekbones. And I have loved her without interruption since then. But love is not a skill. It is a feeling. And the skill of expressing love in ways that another person can receive and feel and build on, that is something entirely different, something I was not taught and did not teach myself. And Clara paid for that gap. She paid for it in all the small moments of a childhood. She paid for it in the car at 12 and in the dark at 17. She paid for it in 14 months of silence that ended not in reconciliation, but in a car accident. That was not a car accident. She paid, and the currency was the ordinary currency of a child who needs more from her father than he can give her. Attention, warmth, presence, the full weight of someone's care landed on her fully, rather than distributed somewhere else. She paid. And I have been paying since October, in this chair, in this room, in the nights that do not end properly. This is my payment. Not that it balances anything. The green coat. I keep seeing the green coat. Dark green, like deep water. Where did she get it? Did she have it before? I try to remember if I have ever seen her in that coat, any version of a coat like that. I do not think so. I think it is new, part of the new life, part of the new self that does not have a father who calls twice a week and leaves inadequate voicemails. She chose that color. She went into a store and she chose it. She stood in front of a mirror in a coat the color of deep water, and she decided it was hers. That is such an ordinary thing, such an utterly ordinary human thing. And I am so far from the ordinary texture of her life that this small act, choosing a coat, is something I can only imagine. I have been far from the ordinary texture of her life for a long time, but this is farther. This is a different category of far. I should have walked over 3 weeks ago. I should have crossed that street. I should have said her name. I should have stood in front of the bus door and said, Clara, just that, just her name, and let what happened next be what it was going to be. But I did not, because even now, even in the moment when I had the chance, even knowing everything I know, having had 3 months to sit with all of it, I still could not move. I am this man. I am still this man. That is the hardest part of all of this. Not the grief, which is real, not the confusion, which is enormous, not even the knowledge that she is alive, which overturns everything and solves nothing. The hardest part is knowing that I am still, at 70 years old, after everything, still the man who stood on the sidewalk and watched the bus go, still the man who did not run, still the man who retreated into himself when the moment demanded he come out. She saw that in me. She saw it across the width of Delancey Street. She saw me standing there, my feet on the sidewalk, not running, and she turned away. Not entirely with cruelty. I do not think it was cruel. I think she turned away because she already knew, because everything about who I am in that moment was legible to her from across the street, because she has been reading me her whole life, reading the particular language of my silences and my stillnesses, and she read me in that moment as clearly as she has ever read me. And what she read confirmed whatever it was she had already decided. He will not run, he will stand there. I can go. And she went. This is the thing that keeps me awake, not with anger. I am past anger, or I am not past it. Anger comes in waves. I have nights where the anger is enormous, and I sit with it and let it be what it is. But right now, in this hour, what keeps me awake is something closer to sorrow, a clear and simple sorrow, for the man I was not capable of being, and the daughter who needed me to be it, and the distance between those two things that was always exactly the size of all the things I did not say. I did not say enough. That is the whole of it, reduced to its smallest form. I did not say enough. Not to Adrian, not to my father before he died, not to Clara. I moved through my life with so much unsaid, so much held back, so much stored in some interior place that I alone had access to, and the people around me lived with the outside of me and never quite got to the inside, because I was not offering the inside, because the inside felt like something that needed to be protected rather than shared. Clara needed the inside. She needed it the way people need air. She was the kind of person who gave you her inside immediately, freely, without calculation, and she expected something similar in return, or she hoped for something similar. And I gave her the outside, the reliable outside, the present but not present outside, and she adjusted. She adjusted and adjusted and adjusted for 37 years. And then she stopped. I understand it. That is what I cannot say to Calvin, what I could not say to Della when she brought food, what I could not say to the grief counselor whose card is still on the counter. I understand it. I am not saying it is right. I am not saying it is what I would have chosen. But I understand the arithmetic of it. I understand how a person arrives at a solution that drastic, not because she is dramatic or unstable or unreasonable, because she is resourceful, because she is a woman who, when the ordinary options are exhausted, finds another way. She always found another way. I should have been proud of that, out loud, where she could hear it. God, I should have said so many things. I go to bed sometimes, and I lie there, and I construct them, the things I should have said, long detailed inventories of things I should have said over 40 years. The pride in her, the worry when she was 17, the admiration for how she moved through the world, the sorry for the newspaper, the sorry for the car, the sorry for the phone call about Terence, and for every other time I showed up in the wrong way, or did not show up at all. The sorry for the waiting room. That one surfaces sometimes when I least expect it. For the 3 hours in the plastic chair, when she was being born on the other side of a door, I could not enter, and I sat very still and went very far away, inside myself, and the pattern was established before she was an hour old. I am sorry for that. I know that makes no logical sense. I know there was nothing I could have done differently in those 3 hours that would have changed anything in that room. But I am sorry for who I turned out to be in that waiting area. I am sorry that the man who was sitting in that plastic chair waiting for news of his daughter's birth was already this man, already the man who goes away when things become uncertain, already the man who would sit with the loss and wait for it to settle. I am sorry I gave her that man. She deserved more than that man. The thing about grief is that it does not care about the order of things. It does not care that she might be alive. It does not lift because of what I saw on Delancey Street. The grief I have been carrying since October has its own structure now, its own weight, and finding out she might be alive has not resolved it, has only complicated it, added new chambers to it that are filled with things like betrayal and relief and rage and wonder and the specific, particular sorrow of understanding too late what you should have done differently. I grieve for Clara. I grieve for the version of her that could have existed if I had been a different kind of father. I grieve for the closeness we did not build, for the conversations we did not have, for all the years when she was within reach and I did not reach. I grieve for the 12-year-old in the car who asked me a direct and reasonable question and got an inadequate answer. I grieve for the 17-year-old sitting in the dark who needed someone to sit with her in the dark and got a man who stood in the doorway. I grieve for all of that. And that grief does not go away because she is alive. If anything, it becomes more precise, more specific, because when she was dead, all of that was finished, sealed, past. And now she is alive, and all of those missed chances are still missed, still past, still unchanged. But now they exist alongside the knowledge that there might be time. There might be one more conversation. There might be one more chance to do the thing I have never done. If she lets me, if I could move, if the man I am is capable of becoming, in the time I have left, someone who runs toward rather than stands still. I do not know if that is possible. I want to believe it is possible. I want to believe that 70 years of becoming this man does not preclude becoming something slightly, essentially different in the years I have left. That the capacity for change does not expire at a certain age. Clara believed in change. That was one of the things about her. She believed that people were capable of being different than they had been. She held on to that belief even when I gave her evidence against it. She came back over the years after the difficult stretches. She tried again. She reached back. She gave me more chances than I deserved, more chances than some people would have given. She was the one extending the hand most of the time. I see that now. Looking back from here, from this chair at this hour, I see how many times it was Clara who reached, who called, who showed up, who sat down at the kitchen table and ate the rice with butter and thyme, and tried to be in the room with me in a way that might produce something genuine. I did not always meet her there. I met her part way. I met her at the food and the surface conversation and the occasional flashes of something more real when I was tired enough or caught off guard enough to let my guard down briefly. But I did not meet her where she was trying to go. I kept myself at a distance from the destination she was aiming for, a closeness that would have required me to put things down, to open things up, to be seen completely. I was afraid of being seen completely. By my own daughter. That is a thing I have to say plainly, because it sounds absurd, and it was absurd, and it was also completely true. I was afraid of being seen by the person who loved me most unconditionally in the world, and the result of that fear was a 37-year half-relationship conducted at a careful remove. And she got tired. She is entitled to have gotten tired. I need to think about what I am going to do. I need to think practically. Because I cannot just sit here forever, though there are nights when it seems like I might. I need to think about what the options actually are. I could go back to Delancey Street every afternoon and wait. That is one option. Stand at that bus stop at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and wait to see if she comes back, because people do come back to the places they go. The bus stop is part of her life. She was there for a reason. I could do that. I could also try to find her another way, through the friends who were at the funeral, through the women who cried. One of them knew. I am almost certain of that. And if I approach that woman, whoever she is, not with accusation, not with the weight of a betrayed father, but with something quieter, something that said, I know what I was. I know what I failed to give. I'm not asking you to undo what she has done. I'm asking only for the chance to say something I should have said before. Maybe that would be heard. Maybe it would not. I think about the woman at the funeral who stood near the back the whole time and did not come to the front. A woman I had never met, tall, wearing a dark blue dress. She watched me the whole service with an expression I could not read. At the time I thought it was grief. Now I think it might have been something else. Guilt, maybe, or wariness, or the expression of a person who knows more than they are saying and is deciding, in real time, how to hold that. I do not know her name. I did not speak to her. Another thing I did not do. There are so many routes I did not take, so many doors I stood in front of and then backed away from. The grief counselor's card is curling on the counter. The woman in the dark blue dress, whose name I do not know. The bus door I could have run to. Calvin's phone that I could call right now, at this hour, in this night, and say, Calvin, I need to tell you something. I do not take these routes. I sit in the chair. I wonder if Clara is awake right now. I wonder if she thinks about me. Not with guilt, necessarily. I do not need her to feel guilty. I have enough guilt in this room for several people. But I wonder if I cross her mind. If she wonders how I am doing in the months since she died. If she thinks about the nights I might be sitting in this chair. If she knows, somehow, the way she always seemed to know things about me that I did not say. That I am here, awake, going over everything. She was perceptive, Clara. Startlingly perceptive. She could read a room from the doorway. She could read a person from across a table. She read me, always, better than I was comfortable being read. And that was part of what made our distance painful in a way that was different from other distances. Because she knew. She knew what was underneath. She was not confused about who I was or what I felt. She saw it. She just could not reach it. And eventually she stopped trying to reach it. And eventually she took the situation apart and rebuilt it without me. She will always be able to read me. If she ever lets me near her again, she will read whatever I am saying, and she will know whether it is true. She will know in the first sentence whether I am doing the thing I always do, or whether something has actually shifted. She will know whether the apology is real, or whether it is another form of the thing I have always done, which is giving her the outside of myself while holding the inside back. I cannot fool her, and I do not want to. I want to give her the inside. I want to hand it over, completely, all of it, even the ugly parts, even the parts I'm ashamed of, and let her do with it whatever she decides to do. That is what I want. Whether it is possible after 70 years of being this way, I genuinely do not know. But I want to try. That is new. The wanting to try is new. Not the wanting her back. that has been there since October, since before October, since the 14 months. But the wanting to try differently, wanting to be in the room with her differently, wanting to give her something that actually constitutes the real me, rather than a careful version of the real me, that is new. Or it is new in a way that feels different from the times I have thought something like this before. Those times were intellectual. This time, it is something else. I think it is because she is alive, because the fact of her being alive makes this not only about grief and regret, it makes it possible. It makes it a question that has a living answer somewhere out there in this city, wearing a dark green coat, getting on buses in the afternoon. She is somewhere. And I am here. And the distance between us, whatever its shape now, is not the permanent distance. It is not the distance that cannot be crossed. That distance, the truly uncrossable one, I thought I was living in it. I thought I was on the far side of it. And then I looked across a street and saw her face, and the distance collapsed into something ordinary, something that can be walked across if two people are willing. If two people are willing. I am willing. I have to find out if she is, and maybe that means going back to Delancey Street. Maybe it means standing at the bus stop on a Tuesday afternoon and waiting, not lying in wait, not ambushing her, not doing the thing a man does when he believes he has the right to demand things of people who have chosen to leave him, but standing there, available, within reach, and letting her decide whether to use that reach. That feels right to me. That feels like the version of this that respects what she has done and what she has chosen, while also saying, I am still here. I am still the man who did not run on Delancey Street. I am still that man, but I am also the man who came back, who thought about it for 3 weeks and came back to the place where she might be and stood there without an agenda other than a conversation. One conversation. If she will have it, I will go back to Delancey Street. Not tomorrow. Maybe not this week. But I will go. I will put on the brown coat that she said made me look like a detective, and I will walk to Delancey Street in the afternoon, and I will stand at the bus stop, and I will wait. And if she comes and she sees me, she will make a decision, and whatever that decision is, I will honor it, because that is the least I can give her, the freedom to decide what she wants from this man, who is her father, who was not enough and knows it, who is sorry in a way that is larger than the word. That is what I will do. Tomorrow, or the next day, or whenever I can make myself stand up from this chair and walk back out into the world. But tonight I'm still here. Tonight there is just this room, and the warm water in the glass I have not touched, and the hum of the refrigerator, and the dark outside the window, and the picture on the dresser that I walked past earlier, the one where she is laughing with her head thrown back. She is alive. She has my ears and her mother's cheekbones and a scar above her left eyebrow, and she is alive somewhere in this city. That has to be enough for tonight, that the distance is crossable, that she is somewhere, that I am here, that there is still, despite everything, time. I don't know if she'll let me in. I don't know if I have the right to ask, but I am going to try to find out, in the only way I know how to try, which is quietly, which is without demanding, which is by showing up and being available and hoping that she looks across and sees something different from what she saw before, something that looks like a man who has finally put the newspaper down. I am so tired. The tiredness that lives in the bones, That is not only about sleep, that is about everything, about the long duration of being this person and carrying this life and all the things I should have done and did not do. The tiredness of a man at the end of something, not the end of everything. I don't believe that yet, but the end of the version of this that was not working, the version where I sat still and waited for things to settle. That version is over. It has to be. She is at a bus stop in a dark green coat in this city, and I'm going to put on the brown coat tomorrow, or the day after, or soon, and I'm going to walk to Delancey Street, and I'm going to stand there and wait, and whatever happens next will be what it is going to be. I cannot fix 40 years. I know that. I just want one more conversation. Just one, if she will have it. Just to say the things. To actually say them. All of them. Without the careful editing, without the distance, without the newspaper in my hands, and my eyes only, partly on her. All of me looking at her. All of me saying, I see you. I have always seen you, even when I was not showing it, and I'm sorry for all the years that showing it would have cost me nothing, and I did not do it anyway. I'm sorry, Clara. I don't know if she can hear that from where she is, but I am going to try to get close enough to say it. That is all. That is everything. I'm going to try. The refrigerator is humming. Outside the window, it is deep into the night now. The kind of dark that will not last much longer. The kind that begins to soften in its edges before you notice it doing so. And then, before long, there is the suggestion of morning, grey and quiet, and cold in the way of February. I should sleep. I should close my eyes and try. But for a moment I just sit here, with her somewhere in this city. My daughter, alive, and the warm water in the glass, and the quiet, and the long, unfinished conversation I have been having with her for 40 years. Still unfinished, still.